Canadian author Lawrence Hill met the Queen in 2009 when he won the Commonwealth Writers' Prize, and he says she left quite an impression on him. I spoke with Lawrence Hill about his time with Her Majesty just a bit earlier. Lawrence Hill, nice to see you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Rosemary. Glad to join you.
We're a few days obviously removed from the announcement of the death of Her Majesty, but the mourning period continues now for some time. I know that you met her when you won the Commonwealth Prize and you were invited to meet her at that point. Can you tell me what that was like for you?
Sure. It was a mixed experience. I mean, I was delighted and honored to meet her, and I quite liked her. And I am sorry that she died, and I'm sorry for her family and for all who loved her.
Sure.
I came to the meeting with mixed feelings. I mean, I'm the product of American immigrants who came to Canada the day after they married. A Black father who actually loved the Queen, and he was a civil rights activist and wrote about Black history in Canada, created the Ontario Black History Society with friends. But my mother, who was a white American civil rights activist who moved with my father to Toronto when they married, was constantly reminding me of her role at the head of the Crown, which oppressed Indigenous people and carried out, a massive slave trade,
Yeah.
18th centuries and so forth. And so my parents had conflicted relationships with her, and I guess I lived both. My father thought of her as a consummate public servant who devoted her life to upholding the Crown, and he admired her in a kind of a tickled sort of way. And so my mother actually was angry that I went to meet her and told me to just stay and keep writing, that I shouldn't waste my time meeting the Queen and upholding the monarchy when I should just write another chapter of a book. But my father, if he'd been alive, would have said, "Go meet her, son, go meet that Queen."
Yeah.
So I was really honored to do so. They wouldn't let me take anything in except my own copy of my book, and that's the Book of Negroes and the clothes on my back. I couldn't even take her a book of mine to give to her. And I was hoping to see a portrait of Queen Charlotte, the wife of King George III, who carried out this reign of slavery, because many think that Queen Charlotte was Black. But they walked me through the Buckingham Palace so fast that I couldn't see or stop to admire the portraits and see how Queen Charlotte was rendered on the walls of Buckingham Palace. So up to the apartments of the Queen, stepped over her corgis who were lying at her door, walked in and greeted her and sat down at a little table with her.
Yeah. It's so fascinating to me because I've heard this story a couple of times now, obviously since the death, this story of these personal encounters with the person that was the Queen that people seem to enjoy, but conflicted with what the monarchy has represented for so long. What have you been thinking about since then? And how would you respond to people who feel also conflicted a little bit about what the monarchy represented, colonization, and then also the woman that the Queen was?
Well, I welcome their sense of conflict. I feel it too. But let's remember that if we're going to be conflicted about the role of the Crown in carrying out slavery and persecuting Indigenous people and colonizing the world in sometimes hideous ways, local authorities, government agencies, positions of people in positions of power, corporations in Canada, the United States, and other countries are fully complicit in that colonial and racist history. So it's a bit much to wave a sanctimonious finger at a head of state who's a figurehead, basically, and as if she were the sole perpetrator of all these injustices. We have to look at Canada too, because none of these things would have taken place in this country without the complicity of Canadian peoples.
The Queen, to some extent, did acknowledge, obviously, the impact of colonialism, but she never apologized for it, took responsibility for it. Even as recently as this summer, there were some Indigenous people who were saying, we would like an apology from the Crown for the way we were treated. Do you think that time will come? Do you think that is necessary for the monarchy to recognize those things?
I don't know if it will come. Yes, they should apologize. How much does an apology mean as opposed to concrete action in the here and now today? I'm not sure. I'm not going to be overwhelmed by and profoundly moved by an apology per se. I'd rather see action on the part of Canadian government authorities as opposed to kind of a vague, trite apology, which is just words. So should it come? Absolutely. How much does it mean? Well, less than concrete actions, in my view.
What was it like to be in that room with the book, a Book of Negroes, with the woman, with the Queen? I mean, there's a lot of sort of symbolism in that moment, I would have imagined, for you.
Yeah, well, this is the reason that I feel so conflicted. In addition to, having a father who admired her from afar and thought of her in a kind of a chuckling way, she was gracious, she was funny, she was witty. She really reminded me of my mother. She was kind of trenchant and a bit self-deprecating. She said, "I haven't read your book, but I've read a synopsis. It's so interesting. Tell me a bit about this Book of Negroes. What is this British ledger anyway?" And here I was, a black boy from Toronto, able to tell the Queen something about British history.